All right. People will probably continue to file into the room as we're getting going. But I wanted to thank everybody again for joining me this morning. We'll be diving into using market analysis tools and competitive analysis tools to drive revenue with your influencer marketing campaigns. And so the goal of today is to have some very, very tangible ways of accomplishing those objectives of expanding your influencer marketing efforts, understanding what's happening in the competitive landscape, maybe trying to unpack why you're seeing the results that you're seeing, maybe shining a light on a path to maybe the results that you want to get to. And so that's our goal today. We'll dive into a few different sections. And before I introduce myself, just a couple of housekeeping things. One is if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. I will answer them at the end unless it seems really, really pertinent to hit them right away. But please go ahead and pile your questions in. They can be as narrow or as broad as you would like, and I'll try to answer them as I can. And happy to follow up over email afterwards if I'm not able to during the meeting. The second piece of housekeeping is that everybody that joins today will actually pull a competitor analysis or a hashtag report. And so as we're diving into things, I'll send a link at the end of the webinar today, and you can submit some information, and we'll just send you a report so you can get a lot of insights over the next couple of days as we head into sort of peak seasonality for brands and agencies. So hang tight throughout. We'll share that link via the comments at the end, and we'll go ahead and get started. Just a brief introduction to myself. My name is Ryan Hilliard. I'm the GM of North America here at HypeAuditor. I've been at HypeAuditor for about 5 months, and prior to that, I was actually a VP of marketing, doing a lot of influencer marketing campaigns for a small software startup. And then even before that, lived the agency life of digital marketing and performance-based marketing. So a lot of what we'll be talking about today is applying practical experience to tools that exist in ways to try to get more out of your influencer marketing efforts. Our agenda is pretty brief. We'll hit 2 main sections because the attendance can sometimes vary. Sometimes we have folks that have very little experience with influencer marketing. They're trying to wrap their head around why is market analysis or competitor analysis important. We'll talk about that initially, just spend a couple of minutes there, and then we'll spend the bulk of the conversation on the right tools and techniques for using market analysis reports to apply them to your actual campaigns and how you execute. This is not going to be a super high level, impractical, not tactical meeting at all. The goal is something that is super tangible that you can run away with. And then, as I mentioned, and as more people continue to join today, we'll be able to put some of this into application directly. If you request a competitor analysis report, I'll share a link at the end of the meeting. You'll be able to see the exact same type of thing that we're showing here and maybe apply it to your strategy. So first, we're just going to hit off with why market analysis matters. And if you're a tactical marketer, you probably roll your eyes when you hear things about industry reports and market trends because it's at such a high level. But I want to unpack what this really means and why it actually is important for brands of all sizes. So when I'm talking about market analysis, the context for this meeting, and this isn't a dictionary definition, but this is just how I was thinking about it as we were putting together the content, was what is all of the information and all of the happenings going on within a specific space, right? It could be a specific location, a specific vertical, but it's what's happening from an organic perspective, what's happening from a paid perspective in this very, very narrow area that you as a business operates in. What are the trends that are occurring? What types of content are going out? The goal being, it should answer the question, what's happening here? Why am I seeing what I'm seeing? What can I do about it? Anytime you have market analysis that is just a really cool chart, but it has no practical application, that's not what I'm talking about here. That's that 50,000 foot view. And I don't think it's particularly valuable. I think we really want to make sure that's sort of putting all of the happenings of your particular industry. If you sell men's wallets and accessories, what's happening in that space when it comes to influencer marketing and creator marketing or UGC. And so that's what we'll be talking about here. Why that's important is for a few reasons, right? If you're new to influencer marketing, it's a great way to understand, where do I start? If you are seeing strange results or really, really positive results, it can usually tell you why you're seeing those results, what's going on in this space, sort of the undercurrent, that idea that a rising tide lifts all boats, can be really, really informative to telling you what's happening in this space. Assessing the competitive landscape is really, really valuable, because those people are those external variables that have a direct impact on your success a lot of times. And so having a pulse on the competitive environment is really, really important. And then lastly, you can use all of this to expand your influencer marketing network. And when I talk with customers, I always try to stress that these reports that we'll dive into and this information that we're gleaning actually can apply to like finding new influencers to drive revenue. It's not just a report you look at once a quarter and go, that's kind of interesting. I guess maybe our share of voice changed. I don't know what we'll do about it. We'll just keep on doing what we're doing. No, you can actually use this information to guide how you go finding new influencers, or how you go about changing the type of content that you're putting out, which immediately impacts the results that you're seeing. So just a summary, right, of everything I'm saying, it should be more than cool charts. The right market analysis tools and the application of that data can impact what you're doing day to day, how you execute on a plan. And maybe for Q4, it's a little bit late. Maybe if you've got a pretty agile organization, you might be able to implement some of these things ahead of your last ship date this month. But these are definitely things that you can also think about as you're doing your planning for Q1 in 2023. So we've talked a little bit about why market analysis is important, what it encompasses as we're thinking about these tools that we're going to dive into. And so now we're going to talk about the right places and the right applications of market analysis. We're going to lump things into 3 categories. So thinking about trends in your space, trending accounts, trending brands, just growth in general, what's happening lately, not just aggregate performance. Then we're going to dive into reports that you can see for competitive intelligence. What is so-and-so doing, and why does it seem so effective, or is it actually effective at all? So really diving into competitive intelligence, competitive insights, to break down what's happening in your space with those direct competitors. And then the last thing is understanding almost a pulse of the area you're operating in, your sort of sub-vertical, with hashtags and mentions. What are the things that everybody's talking about, and how is that changing over time? Because that can really be a guide point for your business into where you should focus. Because if you see negative trends, that can really point to a lot of the negative results you might be seeing, why you're seeing a lower return on your investment from your existing influencer network that was so strong before. It could be that the overall space is sort of evolving, and you need to keep a pulse of that so that you can make adjustments. Typically, our webinars, I like to approach them from a very, very product agnostic point of view, that you could just apply these things anywhere. But sometimes, especially with something like market analysis, that feels a little maybe vague and hand wavy. It's like talking about something at a high level. What do I do with this? And so this webinar is going to be a little bit different than webinars previous, in that we'll be showing reports within our actual tool. So if you're curious and you're thinking, I would love to just be able to do this today, the capability exists out of the box. Now, this isn't meant to be a commercial, but I want to make sure that folks know this information is available and it's accessible to be able to make changes to your strategy now. It's not some idea of like, well, how do I go and compile all of this information? Do I have to subscribe to these industry newsletters? No, you don't. You can simply use the tools that are available. And so I'll highlight that throughout, but the main thing will be gleaning the insights from that data. But I wanted to stress that from the beginning. And if people have questions about the tool itself, I'm happy to answer those or take them offline, however it may be. So finding trends. So when we think about industry analysis, market analysis, a lot of times you hear about the biggest and the best, right? The largest influencers in a space. And if you're a tactician, if you're somebody that executes on influencer marketing, you know this mostly doesn't matter to me. We do not operate as a brand in a space where we're thinking about celebrities all the time. I like to equate it to a lot of times we focus in advertising in general on the Super Bowl. Almost every business, everybody in marketing goes, the Super Bowl is just not something that's ever really going to be practical for us as a brand. The cost is too significant, and who it's reaching is just really not that relevant. And so it's important to dissect this when you're thinking about your space. And if you're talking to an executive that really wants to get into influence marketing, this might be where they're starting, is helping them understand that the more important thing is what's happening lately directly to us, not just big numbers of followers, but engaged real users. That authentic audience is where you're really going to see a direct impact on the overall results from your influencer marketing efforts, not just a big number. And again, I actually know firsthand, chasing a big number with an influencer without much context into their trends or their growth over time or their engagement over time, you can spend a lot of money and get very, very little. And so having that context is very important. So one of the things that we like to stress is that growing accounts can be of any size, right? The growth isn't how I want to find people that just got from 10,000 to 1 million followers last week. That's very unlikely to occur in almost every scenario, right? There might be one person here or there that occasionally does it, sort of takes the world by storm. But most of the time we're talking about trends within a specific size of influencer or a specific size of brand, and they see significant growth over a short time window. And so one of the things that we feel like is really, really important as an influencer marketer is being able to spot those things quickly. And so capturing somebody that's moving from 7,000 followers to 15,000 followers directly in my jewelry space could be really, really applicable if I make jewelry that is aligned with what she talks about all the time. And the really, really incredible value here is that if I can find those influencers early, right, as they're beginning to find that upswing in terms of overall follower growth, I'll be investing in them when they're at this 7 to 10,000 follower level. But in a few weeks, in a few months, they're going to be at $20,000, $30,000 or 30,000 followers. And so my investment is probably the same, but I'm reaping the benefit of that trend. It works the other way too, right? If you invest $10,000 or $15,000 in an influencer with 100,000 followers, but their engagement is going down over time, it's progressively getting worse, their follower count is actually going down over time, that investment you made is it's going to take a lot for it to be worth what it was initially, right? You're sort of swimming upstream. And so it's really, really important to capture people earlier on. Is it possible to catch them before they sort of get that hockey stick? Probably not, right? But being able to identify them here, it's a great way to then dig into the type of content that they put out and see if there's a potential fit. The sort of underlying point again is like that total number of followers probably doesn't matter, right? It is going to be a direct indicator of how much you're probably going to pay this influencer. But when you think about your sort of practical application, what percentage of this audience matters to me, the total number of followers is not it, right? It's going to be some percentage of that. And then from there, what is the growth in that percentage? What is the engagement change in that percentage? So finding people that are seeing that significant growth, you will maximize the return on your investment. You will see more and more results. It'll be similar to like an SEO type strategy for anybody that also does search engine optimization, where you'll see that compiling effect of like, if I put out content with this person on YouTube and they're growing, those videos will still exist and people will still absorb those videos and they will still come through to our site. And so the more they continue to grow, the benefit that is for me. That also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, could drive the type of content that you invest in, because you want to have something that will exist and sort of persist longer than maybe just a story that will eventually go away. I wanted to highlight here just sort of as another example, maybe not as practical for finding new influencers and finding new revenue, but finding brands that are entering the space, right? You can do the same type of thing with our tool, but it's just another really important thing to have your pulse on in this situation. In my space, in my specific vertical, who are the emerging players? I can recall back when I worked at my agency, I was working with a a brand that sold mattresses online. And at that time, it was uh, my client, one other brand, and Casper. And overnight, it felt like within a couple of months, Purple showed up and Lisa showed up, and all of these other brands began just to emerge with a lot of funding and a lot of volume. And it just sort of blindsided us because we just didn't have that pulse of where are people coming from. And so this is another way to just assess what's going on in the competitive landscape, try to catch things early and be able to react, to respond, because you aren't operating in a vacuum at all. All right, so we dove into the importance of identifying trends, how you could do that to find new influencers, how you could do that to manage the competitive landscape. Now we're going to dive into competitive intel more specifically. So when I'm talking about competitor analysis, what the goal is really to be able to assess what is their strategy. So like we'll follow Sephora along. With HypeAuditor, we always just access publicly available data. So all of this is actually data just based off of what Sephora's strategy is going to be. And we'll dive into it as we go throughout. I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that we will be providing competitive analysis reports for folks. And so the types of screenshots you see over the next few slides is the type of information we can provide. I'll share that link at the end of the presentation where you can get your own report for a competitor, for your own brand, for specific hashtags or mentions that you're interested in. But the goal when you're thinking about competitors is not directly to just rip off what they're doing. What they're doing and the success they're seeing is going to be tied to their specific brand, the performance of their website. All of that is going to be pretty unique to them, but it's very important to know how they're investing their time and efforts, what they seem to be seeing success in, because it could be an indicator of where you should focus. It could help you understand, hey, if they seem to resonate with their audience because of this, and I know that this is what their brand stands for, what does our brand stand for, and how can we apply that? And so being able to look at a high level, the amount of organic content going out from an influencer and paid content, right? A lot of times there's this focus on the paid investments that they put out there and those paid relationships. But you can see in this example here, there's a lot of earned stuff happening. And so that can be really, really informative when you're beginning to think about the overall strategy that they're putting in place. Competitive analysis, you really want to try to break down like the types of influencers that they're working with based off both off of size, category, what is the quality of the audience of those influencers. Just because somebody has a lot of followers doesn't mean that that audience is actively engaged. And if the audience isn't actively engaged, it doesn't mean it's providing a lot of value for Sephora, especially in this case at the amount of money it might be demanding. And so being able to break down, okay, they're investing in a lot of very, very small influencers, as you can see in that bottom right-hand corner, influencer account size. It might be that the mega influencers are getting all of the attention, but they're really putting their money behind these small people that have a very, very active, engaged, small audience, that sort of personal nature that comes with influencer marketing. And they're seeing success rate because they continue to build on that we'll see in later slides. We can also see categories here, and that can sometimes be informative for folks. If they see a lot of investment in fashion or lifestyle, these sort of adjacent categories to beauty, maybe I can find influencers that aren't just more makeup artists, right, doing videos directly of their face. Maybe it's something that is adjacent, but it's the same buyer. It's the same way to get in front of my target user, and it will still come across as natural. And it's just a great way to expand your own business. It's also important to understand where they're investing, right? You think about stories, you think about TikToks. When it comes to Instagram directly, I think one of the things that is really, really interesting as you break down the influencer strategy with somebody like Sephora is the amount of money that they're putting into Reels. We assume a little bit that it's requiring additional money or that they're investing more, but because of the sheer quantity of it, they're not putting out that many videos. They're influencers. They're not putting out that many carousels. There's good posts. There's images out there, but they're really investing significantly into Reels, as we can see it's a percentage here during that time range. And it's pretty obvious why. If we look a little bit closer, and I'm not actually sure if my cursor is showing up here, you can see that the Reels that they're putting out are driving a much greater engagement. Now, they blend that strategy, right? Not as many people will view a Reel, will go over to that tab in Instagram as they will maybe a post where they're just sort of mindlessly scrolling on the homepage. And so you want to do both and maximize your exposure, but you don't want to neglect Reels just because they're reaching a smaller audience, because we can see the engagement rate is 12% compared to 0.5% on a carousel. It's 24x better. And so being able to prioritize that and then potentially using that asset in other places is really, really valuable. After that, when you're looking at your competitors, understanding who they're actually reaching. Just because they're making a big splash, it doesn't mean it's a lot of value. It doesn't mean it's actually impacting you. You can actually begin to dive into their strategy and the engaged audience that they're reaching and break down their age and their gender, their interests, the type of hashtags that are being used, the quality of that audience over time, how engaged they are with other people's content, how authentic they are. This really can be a driver of your strategy. And if you're a smaller brand, let's say you're a smaller makeup brand in this case, understanding, can we have a regional focus here? Is there a piece of this that we can break down and say, like, I think that they're leaving space on the table because they're so global, we can dive in a little bit more focus into this one particular area. Last thing I'll say with this slide is that you can kind of get a sense of where they're operating from a sort of brand awareness versus direct response level, right? Just looking at the hashtags used in their post, they're very, very, very high level in terms of the frequency, right? It's very brand heavy, makeup, skincare, not something hyper specific that would probably drive a little better direct response. They're really just trying to make sure the awareness is there. And they're getting some of that also from the partnerships with their influencers. But that might be a guide for you as to, there might be areas or hashtags that are a little bit more focused on direct response, a little bit narrow that we could lean into because they're not really focusing there. There could be some white space for us. We'll touch briefly on this slide. I think it's always interesting to understand the efficiency of your content, right? We're estimating some earned media value and estimating the reach and the engaged audience, and comparing that with how much it appears you're probably investing based off of what we know about influencer size and the costs associated there. Where you compete and how you can sort of move into that sort of leader space is a good way to assess, just at a general level, how is our campaign doing compared to others, right? This isn't the ultimate driver of what's happening, but if you're a marketer, it could be a great thing to show executive teams, leadership teams, like, hey, we're trying to move into this more efficient, high frequency, high visibility space. But right now we're over here. It feels like we're investing a lot, but comparatively, we're just not. And so we really need to move ourselves in this direction. It can help aid those conversations. And lastly, and I even posted about this on LinkedIn the other day, I think this is super interesting, being able to understand people's investment in different types of influencers and how it's changing over time and what's driving those changes, right? What's the engagement change over time and how is that impacting my business directly? Did I see significant drop in performance in August for my influencer marketing efforts, for my overall digital sales? Maybe it has something to do with the amount of engagement Ulta was getting and the partnerships that they were stirring up during that time. Again, something that you can use to actually try to inform what's happening and then get in front of it for the future months. The last thing when it comes to competitive insights before we shift into hashtags and sort of getting a pulse of the entire industry and how you can use that to find new influencers and grow your revenue is just looking at how your brand is impacting the overall space that you're operating in. What is your share of voice? What is your ability to assess, like, how are people seeing me compared to others? If you've worked with a PR agency, that share of voice is a really, really important metric because you want to be able to be in those conversations when it's really particularly about you and your space, right? If you're a leading player in the makeup space, maybe like Sephora, or maybe you're trying to emerge into a new space, it's important to have an idea of, like, out of all of the posts in the world, like how much is engagement is around what we're doing and how is that percentage changing over time? What can we do about that? And so we try to make those reports available so that you can have at least just that high level view of how that's evolving, how your investments are paying off. This is more of a reflective type of view, but I think it's always important to, after you execute, go back and see, well, what was the impact of that? Did we actually see our share of voice go up? Because if we did, we should see our sort of share of people's wallets go up as well. We should see revenue increases from that growth and share of voice. If you saw significant growth in revenue, it might be that, hey, you did make an impact there. And so then you can continue to build on that. So we talked a little about finding trending accounts. We talked about understanding what the competitive landscape is about. Briefly, I want to dive into hashtags and mentions and how you can use what's happening there with what hashtag people are using, the changes in there to inform your influencer marketing strategy, to find new influencers, to see overall growth. We're getting close on time, so we'll move pretty quickly here. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comment bar. And then we'll also, at the end of the webinar today, share a link to where you can actually get your own competitive analysis report or hashtags report to shape your strategy. So hashtags and mentions are really, really important because they're an active pulse on what's going on in my particular space. If you are using the hashtag makeup, right? If you think about that example from Sephora before, if makeup continues to trend upwards, it tells you there's a lot of engagement and interest in this space. If you begin to see that trend downwards, that can tell you I need to begin to think of new areas, new ways to touch my audience. Where are they going in general? And so it's really, really important active pulse. But at a high level, it just says, okay, what's happening in our space? What do I do with this? And so what we wanted to show is how you can actually break that down. All of that aggregated data does boil down to like specific influencers that are posting this content. Are they posting it organically? Are they posting it as a sponsored post? Is it look like it's sponsored, but we're not quite sure? Being able to break that down is a great way to understand what type of content is going out on this. Is it reels? Is it carousels? Is it videos? What does it look like in general? How is this changing over time? The nature of the videos or the photos. And then also, is there an opportunity to find influencers that are posting organically about something that's really, really relevant to me that maybe I want to go and work with them and stir up a more commercial relationship, or it could be more frequent. We can get more value out of it. So I talked about this a little bit, but one of the things that I think is really, really important is understanding that people that are regularly posting content on a specific hashtag, if they're influencers, are likely seeing that growth in their following because of the type of content that they're putting out. And so it's got to be something that you can easily digest. What is the earned value, or what is the earned engagement of these posts that they're putting out? Because if it's very, very strong, like somebody like that very top person, Laura, maybe there is an opportunity for us to stir up a commercial relationship. Hey, she's always talking about DIY stuff. Well, we sell furniture. Maybe there's something of a relationship there because we know that our buyers love DIY and we have furniture. And so let's try to find that relationship there. It doesn't have to be people that are talking very specifically about your brand, but it could be other things that are adjacent or interesting to you. It's just another way to explore and find new influencers. So we came sort of screaming in at the end there. I went a little bit quick. I want to make sure that we leave it open for everybody's questions today. But a couple of the things that we talked about when it comes to using market analysis and trying to apply it to your very, very specific scenario to drive more revenues. We talked about the importance and how you go about finding trending accounts and influencers, trending brands that will influence the results that you're seeing, how you can use competitive intelligence to shape the world around you, understand what's their strategy, how are they implementing it, who are they working with, are there people that we could work with that they're working with, even applying some of those competitive principles to non-competitors, but that you think are very interesting in breaking down their approach to influencer marketing, why they might be seeing the success that they are seeing. And then lastly, just the hashtags and mentions, using that as a pulse for what's going on in the industry, but then also how can I use that to find new influencers and outreach to folks. So I'm going to pause for a moment to see if there's any questions that we have come up as we're going through this. While I'm waiting to see if there's any additional questions that come up, I'm going to go ahead and share in the chat this link to where you can actually request a competitor analysis report. I think it went live there. I'll have to jump over to the actual broadcast to make sure. But if you click that link, you're actually able to share with us your email and the actual competitor or hashtag that you'd like to see a robust report on. And we'll send that along to you. And we can also walk you through what insights you can glean from this. So I definitely encourage folks to do that. This is a completely free thing. Feel free to reach out to it. Again, all of these reports and the information that we had here is just readily available to be at your fingertips. something that you can begin using today to begin to outreach to new influencers, to try to grow your revenue, to try to track what's happening in your space. Just hold for another minute or so to see if anybody has any questions, but I wanted to thank everybody in advance of that just for joining me on the webinar today, hearing about how you can use market analysis tools and competitive analysis tools to shape your influencer marketing strategy, how you can actually tie that in with sort of a tactical finding new influencers, finding new areas to focus on content, specific types of content to focus on. Well, cool. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody again for joining. Make sure you check that comment box for the link to request your own report. And feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have.